So I'm here to tell you why a mock-up is gonna save you a lot of emotions. I did find out it was likely due to a printing mishap of, if you've watched some of my sewing videos before, the type of pattern that I get that you can print out on multiple sheets of paper and then put together. I don't necessarily blame the person who was helping me print it out, because they do so at a workspace and a place that has a lot going on. But this is a good opportunity to show you how I'm gonna fix it. I did not do any testing whatsoever. What kind of sent me into a bit of a breakdown is because I had such confidence in the pattern and I did not test it, I cut out some other fabric that was very important to me, but I have tracked down, and hopefully I can get some to make a full-on shirt in the future, but I cut it out. There's not enough fabric left. When I do get some of the new fabric and make a whole shirt that doesn't need like pieces stuck in or like contrasts and whatever, if you feel like you're around my size, I will probably be putting that on the shop. The pattern is being reprinted. The seam allowance it was set to was not what I had added, which I don't think would make a huge difference because it was just it would just make it a slightly bigger piece, but sewing on the same thread line. But I wanted to own up to that too, so I can remember in the future to actually check that out. Still tired, but at least there's tea. Okay, now from here forward, I'm more aware of why certain pattern pieces look the way that they do, how they work, why there's top stitching. Kind of when I was a younger teenager, I was very into origami. I never got super far. I wasn't doing like crazy roses and stuff, but I could do paper cranes without looking up directions. It's kind of the same function in my brain at this point, where I know why certain things look the way that they do, and so now I can describe it to you and why things work the way they do, how things pop onto different things, and here's that.
We need to address a mistake that we made.
Big mistake. Sometimes I don't like it. It doesn't really like help them.
I could just kind of extend this.
Like, maybe just
kind of
extend that.
Right.
Because I don't know if there's too much point in like.
Murphy, come back. There is, however, some poetry in getting Halloween fabric on a Black Friday sale, so. So, it worked. There's still some very slight issues, like I tend to test things by going like that. So there's still some, just a little bit right here. But I tend to wear things like this anyway. And it's typically more of a problem when things are all buttoned down like this. But I very rarely do that unless I'm like at a wedding or something, and I'm probably not going to be going to a wedding unless it's someplace that's cool with me wearing my sleeves like this. The edge stitching is not all fantastic, and I was trying to polish it up because I kind of like where it's going, but it is technically just the mock-up. My favorite thing in the directions, because I read the freaking directions this time, is, yeah, you can probably, is the flat felled seams. And if you don't know what those are, it's basically when you get something that is machine made or industry made. Like, machines do this really well, so it's common in fast fashion, like if you get something from Target men's section, I guess. They finish the seams on the inside like this. Which is a little bit of a pain, but I really like button-down shirts, so the more that I do them, the less of a pain it's actually going to be. And this, I realized, is kind of very close to my skin tone, which is a little weird. So once I find the buttons that I set aside for this, because I had them, and they went somewhere, what I think I'm going to do is get permanent fabric markers and do some kind of design on this, probably illuminated manuscript-esque, and that'll be a different video, but I will take suggestions on what to slip into the lorem ipsum on that. I may not completely finish the actual shirt that this video is for in time for this video, but the fabric for that is a lot more fun to look at, so I saved that for the more in-depth explanation of how things work. So if you wanted to do a project like this, you just discovered freesewing.org, here's what it looks actually in visual terms, because I had to squint real hard at some of the directions and actually move around my pieces at the same time. Hopefully I can give you some ideas and make you feel like you are definitely capable of doing this, because I have a lot of practice doing other stuff. Most of my income is making toys, plushies, but growing up I did some clothes, but I was never really allowed to do it out of stuff that I really wanted to do or pick out most of my own patterns. So, but more on that later. We go with, as I said, something way more fun to look at. So to start off with, we have the back, which is cut on the fold. So the actual paper pattern piece is about like that. And you might notice it doesn't really have shoulders at the top. That's because in this version of button-down shirt, there is a separate yoke to help kind of polish it up a little bit more. And so I'm going to slowly put together how it needs to be pinned, and then I'll describe why it does that. Okay, which looks normal, right? Because then it flips up and attaches to the front. But then this one, this also gets weirdly sandwiched in the back. That's because when you put the front on, you turn it out inside out in such a way that you'll actually see the wrong side of the fabric on the inside, but then it'll be all finished off and no seams showing, and it's stronger on the back. Like that. And then the inside would look like this. If you already have any button-down shirts in your closet or a dresser or anything like that, you might already have something that you can kind of refer to here. And now we have the two fronts, and it is very important that you not confuse these two right on the lines. And I just did little tiny snips when cutting it out in the seam allowance, so that I can sew right over them and it's not going to interfere with anything. And then this one. Okay. This one, and then flipped, and then flipped. That one is the left side. This one had just the seam allowance, and then flipped, and then flipped. So this is about that big. That one is way bigger. That's because these are going to overlap. And with the buttonholes, you need a little bit more either interfacing or just more layers of fabric in general is best. Okay. So it is very important to put these on the correct sides. And when you have a fabric that looks the same on both sides, it's a lot harder. But with this one, it's very, very obvious. Okay, so instead of pinning to the entire, like all of the layers here, pin this to everything except for the yoke that has the contrast on the back. And so pin this, but don't immediately sew it, and I'll show you once I find wherever my pins are, I'll show you why in just a second. 1, and 2, and 3, but it's not connected to the bag here. That's important. Okay, so all connected. And then, and by the way, I just ironed these beforehand because even if they come undone, you can kind of still see the line, and then I don't have to do it later and moving around the whole fabric. But anyway, corners and shoulders, and then take everything here, absolutely everything, until this shows itself. And take it and pin it in the exact same way, and then sew it, and then pull it out through the middle, which I'll show you because it's really satisfying. Sausage. And everything goes out through the neck. So that's the inside. And then also these seams at the top are all finished on the inside. And then what the pattern dictates is press this as well as you can so everything's all separated and flat. And then top stitch on the thicker side. So a line here and at the other shoulder and then down at the bottom. So I'm going to do that and you'll see that as I go on to the next step. Ta-da! One of many things that I consistently forget to do, as well as point out on my crafting videos, is when your paper patterns have markings for you to transfer to your fabric. And a lot of the times I'm making simple things where I can kind of just make it work. But you see here and here, these are ones that you actually want to make sure that you transfer. And so unless you have a lot of experience transferring with like a fabric marker or something like that, what you can do is just snip a little bit into the seam allowance, because the stitch line is going to be way in here, so you can just make a little something that's noticeable enough but doesn't go deep enough in to interfere with you actually making the thing. Another thing here is you definitely want to pay attention to where these lines are, because those are little pleats. It makes the cuff actually fit once you're done with the rest of the sleeve. But on here, you want to cut the slash because it makes the vent that you see on most button-down shirts. But especially make sure that you have these mirrored, as in don't just cut one out and then place it again and then cut one out, because this is different. There's like a swoosh here, and then the vent is going to be on different sides. And especially because this has a right side and a wrong side, you want to make sure that it's either on a fold or you flip the pattern piece over and transfer everything. Oof. So I don't think I'm gonna get this done by when I wanted to post the video, but I wanted to do a little more tonight. Just to keep this going, because not just for video, I want this shirt. So we have the sleeves with the slit cut, and you can't really see the little tiny cuts here that I can go into later. But I pre-ironed the little... I'll be back. I pre-ironed the little sleeve placket. So I don't know if you can see the lines on here. Let me... Lines. Because that makes it easier to do the crazy person thing and not use more pins than necessary, I guess. Don't get used to that until you do your mock-ups and everything. But so you can see here, there is the sleeve vent, and this will be sewn right smack on the first line here, just straight down. And then it'll flip back over and then get top stitched, which I've... There we go. Sorry about the light. I'm a vampire. There we go. And do that on both sides on the smaller end of things. And the other side of the vent is the weird one. So this one, the pattern piece, has this weird edge on it. So you will turn in the seam allowance and iron, and then fold in half. It's very important that it hits all the right lines that you'll see on the pattern piece if you do this particular pattern. Focus. Because the edge of this fabric doesn't go all the way to the top, and then it slopes down, and you have this gap. It doesn't perfectly match up. And then I might be doing this a little bit off, but I'm going to do it the same way I did on the mock-up and see if I can correct some of the edges as I go. So you have the gap there and the little slope down. You fold down first and press, and then you fold and press. So you have the opening here, the little gap, and then the little triangle. And this is one you definitely have to use pins for, because I have sewn a lot, and still this one kind of makes me squint and whatnot. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit more so you can see me wrestling with getting this on with the pins. One thing I didn't mention is that these definitely have to be also mirrored, so you can't just take the pattern piece and cut out one and then move it and then cut out one. You have to take it and then flip it over to make sure that it goes on each side. These ones are just all symmetrical, the little tiny guys, so that doesn't really matter how you cut those out. With the seam allowance there, don't go all the way to the inside, so that it actually has some hanging out to overlap with this, so it'll be twice as wide as the finished product of the little one. So I just wanted to say what I did on the other side. I'll show you real quick after I put this in. It's a little bit hard to see pattern on pattern, but I showed a little bit of the side of the sleeve on the tan mock-up. So it's a little triangle part in there, which is the So triangle here. And so I like to measure how wide that is, and then just go down, kind of hold it with my fingy, and then with both layers on top of each other, mark it with the pin here. And so what'll happen is I will also top stitch this, but it'll go all the way up around the corner, down, and then over the top of this pin, which overlaps with, so it overlaps this way, but also the small part goes to about here. So it's meant to like kind of encapsulate as much raw edges as possible and reinforce the corner for if things are flapping or it's a point of tension. So I always try to keep some pins around even if I'm not using them a ton. But I just took one of them, kind of tucked in the little end here. So when I top stitched, I didn't go all the way down because I knew that I wanted to tuck a little bit more in than I was doing on other ones. And I'm gonna fix this part. So when you're top stitching, if you are not well versed in it, you haven't done a ton of it before, as I said, I've made clothes, but I haven't made a ton of them with top stitching. It's meant to polish things off, and I was actually looking at some of my other shirts and realized, oh, it makes it kind of look as polished as something manufactured, I guess. But then you can customize it like this. So you just basically, you just pick a spot to keep the edge, and instead of just kind of going all the way through and kind of wobbling and everything with the needle trying to keep it straight, just try to keep the edge at the consistent spot. And there's like a little dip in the foot that I use, so I'm gonna try to keep it there. I should have used more pins. I don't know where they are. I'm feeling where they are, but I'm being like that tonight. And what I'm doing here is just, I'm not taking the pin out because this is marking an important spot. I'm just moving it more out so the fabric flattens a little bit more and the foot isn't going to complain about it as much. And when it gets to a very sensitive area, like I need to hit it spot on, I'm just cranking the side wheel instead of the pedal. And so put it down so it can pivot and it's not going to float around if you pull the foot up. And on this one, I think I will take out, because it'll get held down when I put it back down. Yep. And also either very, very slow pedal or just crank it with your hand. Okay, so I said I was going to go across the top of that not needle, the pin. Walk it right up next to it. Turn again. And so I'm going to go all the way to the end, try not to overlap, and then just all the way back for reinforced stitch. And if you're not familiar with sewing machines, the sound is just this thing over here, which makes it go backwards. Which is harder to see. The only thing is you can't turn the knob and hold that at the same time. So let's one more. Okay. And here's what it looks like on the back. Not perfect, but it will close. And there'll be like a little button here and then a buttonhole, maybe. And that little bit got tucked inside. There's still a little tiny bit of raw edge there. But I'm planning to make a bunch of these. And all of the bestest, most kookiest fabrics. So I'm just going to do the other one and then probably a few clips without me talking. Just because I want to do a little bit more than that, but it's starting to get late. And I have a work event tomorrow that's outside. And I need to figure out Okay, so I didn't show it in this one, but you're going to want to get yourself some iron-on interfacing. You can do this with just sew-on, but the iron-on is much, much easier. And it doesn't have to be perfect all the way around. It has to be pretty close, though. Just whatever doesn't interfere with the shape of the piece. So this is the cuffs. 2 of those, and then they'll have backing, so you just need to do 2 of them. Ta-da. And then this is the collar stand, because the collar isn't just smack onto the body. There's a little gap on it, makes it more comfortable, and is slightly curved. And then the collar. So I'm going to put together the cuffs first, and then it's the pointy part of the collar, and then I will get back to you when those need assembled. Only one side, because then trim this close so you can turn it inside out and it gets pointy without the bulk of it getting in the way. Not right up next to it, but pretty close. Especially if yours comes out like mine and has kind of these little stretched stitches. Make sure you don't cut those. On the corners, take something that has a point on it but is not sharp. Otherwise you will go through the fabric, especially if you haven't done this before. And pokey pokey. Okay, set that one aside, as well as the collar stand. And do the same thing with the cuffs. These definitely get ironed down. So iron it down as flat as you can get it, as close to the edge. And then top stitch, leaving the seam allowance amount at the bottom. And same thing for this. So you iron it down, and then bump in by the seam allowance, and then go all the way around. Peace. And so what this will have you do is center the top of the collar onto the collar stand, and I'm going to show you how I do that without getting crazy with rulers and stuff. So this is symmetrical and folds easily in half. That means I cut it correctly and everything. And so you don't need to crease it or anything, but you do need to find the specific middle, not just kind of the rounded middle. Take a pin and put it right down in the middle, where you don't need to crease it all the way down, but pinch the top so you can still see the mark. And then take your top collar, do the same thing, and you will match it up. I think I need easier to do that. Okay, and you'll match it up. And where's another pin? Where did you go? And honestly, this has a lot to do with motor functions and kind of getting used to doing it. I do this a lot when I make my plushies for the shop, and I'm just used to it. So maybe try on something that's not a shirt first if you're not entirely sure about messing around with this. So this also has a little bit of a crease. And then you will match those up. And clamp down here. And repin it. So you have the entire center. And then you can go on to match up everything on there. This might be a little bit finagly because you see how this is slightly larger than here. That's because these are 2 curves. And so because this is quilting cotton, even when it has the interfacing on the back, it will still have a little bit of give. So make it work and then pin it. Okay, so one side of the stand and then the top collar. So because you're forcing curves to match up to each other, there is going to be a little bit of wobbliness. Your other one, and you plop it right down, make sure it matches the back here, and then transfer those pins all over and add some more at the sides, just in case. Okay, and what you're going to trim is the pretty close to the curves here. So you see where the top collar ends to about halfway down, maybe. Okay. So iron this down, but do not top stitch like you've done everything else. So the front band's down because it's getting dark and I have not put on this doesn't have an overhead light on it. Even though this has some lovely natural light since I changed the orientation, it's getting dark and I really don't feel like trying to sew in the dark. And I have so many other things going on, but, just top stitch on the very edge like you've been doing for pretty much everything else. Okay, so after you have decided which one goes where, go directly over, like don't spin it around or anything, take it and flip it over and pin the sides together. Oh. And that's also where the diagonals help a little bit. So pin the corners and then pin where the markings match up. I'll show you that in a second because I'm still getting used to how I film the big blob of stuff because I don't have like a big work table or anything. But something about this pattern is that you can match up this one here and then pin it. And then, so here's a sleeve, and here's the other mark. So there isn't another like little snip here. It's going to be the bottom of the yoke seam. Okay, so you have at least 4. You could do a little bit more than that, probably 1 in between each of them. Oh, I kind of jumped the gun there. So this is between the marks, and I said earlier that this type of fabric, it is solid, but it does have a little bit of give to it. And that is how you're going to make this fit. Be careful not to, I did something kind of weird there, but it shouldn't affect anything. But be careful not to pull too hard. It's definitely a kind of muscle memory skill to understand how much give there is in any specific kind of fabric. So it almost matches up, but it doesn't just simply lay flat. And my best advice for making that fit is probably get it close and then stick a pin in the middle and then work on a section at a time, which will probably come out looking like like this. I will probably squish it and unsquish it a little bit more. So it's really, really close. And like as I sew it, I'll have to make sure things match up. Yeah, the weirdness of sleeve caps. Now you can do that with the other one, or you can do this next step before you do everything on the other one. But I think I'm going to do everything all at once, but describe this first. But essentially, the reason you do this twice is because a flat felled seam is one where it's offset, and then you iron it over, which I showed you in the tan one. So I'm going to pin this to the other side, and then grab a ruler, and the seam allowance I'm using for this one is 1 centimeter, I think. So essentially that's keeping this side even, because this is like down the side of the body, and then you go up and make sure that is all even. And I find it easier pinning it first, because then you can just slide it down, check it, and then put the pin back, and then go all the way. What's in the box? What's in the box? Nothing. Okay, next, once you have finagled your sleeve caps, I like to do it at the sides and then at the top first. But basically what you will be doing is repinning it like so. And make that as flat as possible. It's still going to have some wrinkles over the sleeve cap like it did before, but I will show you that in a little bit, because in the meantime I am actually going to show you the collar, because I forgot that I had pinned this and it's getting really annoying getting poked all over the place. So you do the same thing, matching the center parts to each other, and then if your seam allowances were all consistent, then it will match up with the sides here. So at the button bands, you will have the ends, and then in the middle to the ends, you will ease it through and then pin it down, and then zoom across it with just the one layer. Like yours might be flipped over, you might have your interfacing on this part, but just the one layer. Go all the way across. I'm not going to pin it right now, but essentially this gets flipped up, this gets turned under, and then top stitched around, which I'll show you after I fix that thing. Okay, and then finally come over to zap it on the ironing board. When you get up to the sleeve cap, keep in mind that you do have around a bit over here that you can kind of splay it out on, but this is getting kind of tedious for today, so I would like to pace myself by doing just this, and then maybe the top stitching, and then hopefully tomorrow we can finish this. Right, so usually my rule in top stitching is to... My rule in top stitching is to make sure everything is on the front, because if there's a little wiggliness, some weirdness, in the stitch line, then it'll just be covered up in the bottom. But on this one, it is necessary to make sure I can actually see the edge here, because just like we did on the back and on the collar and cuffs, stuff like that, we are going to pick a spot, and the directions for this pattern say it's okay if this side wiggles a little bit, as long as you still catch it and it's still secure, but make sure that it's always an even distance away from the actual stitch line. So we're going to use this as the gauge for how far away the foot is going to go. So because it's big enough, I tend to, or at least have in the mock-ups and tests and everything, keep the stitch line right on the edge of the foot right here. And don't start at the very edge, but not way inside. So I'm holding that down. I can pull this out. Okay, so that's just gonna get sucked up right through the edge. And make sure everything is as flat as possible so you don't have to fix it on the other side. So it's not so much an edge stitch as just making sure this is being held down in a tidy kind of way. The ironing also helps for when it's best to pull pins out so you can straighten it. It's not going to immediately pop back up. Okay. Oh, nicely finished. There might be one spot in here where I didn't catch the inside perfectly, but it's way better than even the mock-up. And also, if you're trying flat felt seams for the first time, I recommend getting a kind of busy pattern. Oh, there's a spot I need to fix. In which case I pop it open, flatten it out, and then redo it. If it's your first time doing flat felt seams, I recommend trying it with straight seams and or getting like a super busy fabric, because even if it's not perfect all the way around, as long as you don't have any bunch ups like that I need to fix, then you're good. So what I learned on the mock-up is that you can go all the way down through the sleeve about halfway. If you shift things around, make sure you're only sewing on what you want to. And then backstitch a little bit to hold your spot. And then flip it around and go from the other side. Which also enables you to take out some of the pins that are trying to bite your hand off. Still a little bit snug, but I can do that without worrying. And I'm adding no crime. I can do that without worrying. And I definitely see all of my mistakes and things that may need hand sewn down in the future, but this is wearable, especially after I put some freaking buttons on it, but it actually fits. I could go all the way up if I wanted. This may be what I work on at the next market, just putting on some buttons if I mark them out and stuff, and because you probably don't want to just hang out while I put buttons on. That's not the point of this video. And the overarching point of this video is to buttons will go everywhere, but I will probably be wearing it like that. My brain feels fuzzy lately, and it's not because I don't like this, it's because probably the last 5 markets have been incredibly unprofessional, so I am coping with other people's decisions impacting my business and my finances. If you dig this video, you would like to see me walk you through more projects. If you like this video and you would like me to, if you like this video and you'd like me to walk you through more projects, that's a huge part of what I'm here for. I really don't mesh well with a lot of ways that people describe things, and even though I do also follow other people who sew, I am noticing a distinct lack of interesting and at least aesthetically fun to watch videos. It's either super, super bare bones or more emphasis on the person, I guess. And power to you if that's your thing. There's always a balance people have to find. I mention a lot that I consider myself an enabler in a positive sense. If there's something that I skipped over in the walkthrough how to make something like this, or you have further questions or ideas of, well, what if I happen to do it this way? I can either help out with that, or I might have a suggestion on what to try. Because I made this for me, whatever you're making needs to be for you. If you like this video but sewing is not your thing, if you have any other project ideas, or you know someone who would greatly benefit from having to kind of walk through like this, please feel free to send to your friends, your enemies, your favorite shadow people. Creation is my full-time job. Due to multiple disabilities that a lot of people have made clear I'm not allowed to have, creating is my full-time job, and I have many streams that go into the same efforts. But that's also partially due to disability. This is something that I can do, and it's something that I have to do. I also definitely wanted to add that yes, I hate Christmas. And if you have followed me on other social medias, you might have gotten that inkling already. Doing something like spooky and very traditionally Halloween is kind of some of my coping mechanism. This video is coming out the week before Christmas, so I don't know how well purchases would be shipping in time for Christmas or whatever else it is that you celebrate, but this Saturday we're doing some small Yule festivities with a friend of ours that I'm very much looking forward to. If you see this video and you are in the Seattle area, hit up Instagram or my events page on the website, and I would really appreciate if you could come by and see some of my efforts in person. YouTube is one part of my full-time job. I hate the term creator because it kind of flattens a lot of different things, even if it's accurate in some contexts. It's something I can do without selling my soul to very, very bad situations that I have been in before, and I'm not going to put myself in again. If you dig this video, I would really appreciate if you could share it to other people who could use some enablism in their life. Or especially if you have other project questions or ideas. I love to try things out, and even if it's not something that strictly I would do for myself, I really love knowing how to do things, because part of me flexing and exercising my creativity is taking a medium that is not typically associated with styles that I like and then turning it into something that I would use day to day, but documenting and walking through well enough so that you can still take that and reverse engineer it from me and then do something for yourself. As I've said many times before, thank you for being here, and I do really mean that, and I will see you